we begin tonight in Paris, which is hosting a summit with Ukraine and its allies aimed at finalizing their contributions to future security guarantees for Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire. U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner arrived at the presidential palace to meet with President Emmanuel Macron today ahead of the gathering. Around 30 countries are attending from what is known as the Coalition of the Willing in support of Ukraine's defense against Russia's full-scale invasion. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said that although he is seeking a diplomatic solution, he has discussed strengthening Ukraine's defenses with President Macron. Well, I'm joined now by Christina Betzina, Senior Fellow and Head of the Geopolitics team at the German Marshall Fund. Christina, it's good to have you with us. Even though the U.S. is not part of the Coalition of the Willing, but only an associate partner, Witkoff and Kushner, they are in Paris today. What do you read into that?
I think the presence of Witkoff and Kushner in this meeting in Paris is a very hopeful sign for there being real movement on the Coalition of the Willing. Witkoff and Kushner have been crucial in getting the next stage of the talks toward Ukrainian ceasefire going in Moscow and in Ukraine. Currently, they are the ones heading the effort of trying to get to Ukraine peace. The question that many Europeans have had, and on both sides of the Atlantic, a crucial question has been, what is the role of Europe in European security? What is the role of Ukraine in the European security architecture? And the European process for developing a coalition of the willing has happened in many ways in parallel to the shuttle diplomacy that Witkoff and Kushner have been doing between Washington, Miami, Moscow, and Kyiv. Now we see a greater alignment between these efforts and potentially, therefore, the next step of agreement. The United States' involvement in security guarantees would be a very important signal to Ukrainians and to Russia about the seriousness of the U.S. commitment to Ukraine and to peace. And while the Coalition of the Willing is merely a European effort, which is mostly how it's been thus far, it doesn't have the weight that it would have if there were significant American guarantees with clear parameters about what that U.S. participation would be.
You say as these forces are coming into alignment, this is all happening just as we are seeing the events of the last 96 hours in Venezuela, those events taking place. How concerned are you, as we've heard from others, that the events in Venezuela are going to distract the United States and eventually put Ukraine and the security of Ukraine on the back burner for Washington?
I would say that absolutely has already happened. If you look at what has happened in this year, the primary focus of American foreign policy hasn't been Ukraine. It has not been European security, but instead it has been a focus on the Western Hemisphere, on Latin America, on Venezuela. The way that Donald Trump has spoken about his intentions to keep an eye on security in Cuba and Colombia and Greenland also suggests a primary focus on the Western Hemisphere. And this is exactly what the U.S. said would happen in the national security strategy that was published in the beginning of December. So we see now in practice the promise that was made in this very important national strategy in December. Ukraine and European security fall to the secondary position. We do not see Vance right now sitting with Macron in Paris in these talks. We do not see the vice president. We do not see the secretary of state. It instead is these special envoys. So if you look at this level of personalities as one measure of this importance, already the Western Hemisphere is more important than European security at this stage for these crucial negotiations.
Let me just ask you before we run out of time, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, he is having to navigate the differences between European countries and the Americans. How well is he walking this tightrope, do you think?
European security is going to be challenging, and getting the right balance for Ukraine is also not going to be easy, because the question of Greenland is making the ties between Europe and the United States more complicated. Even though this meeting today in Paris is supposed to be about Ukraine, there have been statements coming out from various constellations of either Nordic or broader European allies that are seeking to emphasize the importance of sovereignty for Denmark, that Greenland's questions are for Greenland and for Denmark alone to weigh in on. And this is muddling that question of what is the scope of this meeting. Ukraine is going to have to struggle to maintain attention on Ukrainian issues in this meeting in Paris and more broadly globally, as so many other issues now are rising to the fore.
Christina Brzezina with the German Marshall Fund. Christina, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our correspondent Rosie Burchard, she joins us now from Paris. Rosie, the U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they are at this meeting in Paris today, even though the U.S. is not part of the coalition of the willing. So how is their participation, how is it viewed by European leaders who were there?
What the Europeans want from the US side is to sign up a concrete commitment that they will be involved in some way or other in these future security guarantees. And that is what we're expecting, that there will be some sort of a US commitment to be involved in what we will get, a statement we're expecting where they will spell out in further detail than ever before exactly what those security guarantees would look like. So which measures might be taken if Russia were to invade again in future, and countries and would be willing in the European Union, some of them at least, to potentially put some of their own military troops on the line in terms of trying to back up that ceasefire. We're expecting more details on that than ever before, but let's be clear, these remain hypothetical, these commitments, so long as there is no ceasefire in place. And even if there is that US backstop, that's a commitment from the United States that it will be involved and ready to kind of back up European troops with support, logistics, military intelligence and so on if they were required to step in. But without a ceasefire, those commitments remain hypothetical, and very few people here think Russia has any real interest in peace at the moment.
Rosie, we understand that the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, he's also taking part in this meeting in Paris. And I'm wondering, how is he navigating the differences between the Europeans and the Americans here, especially when we're talking about security guarantees?
Look, I think his priority, other than, of course, trying to ensure peace and the end of the war, is to show diplomatically that he is not the one obstructing peace. And I think that's something the Europeans themselves are very keen to show too, because, of course, there's always this fear that the US might simply listen to what Russia has to say and go over to more of that Russian point of view. So they're trying very much, and Zelenskyy is trying very much to keep Washington on side, because he knows that while the Europeans are the ones that matter so much when it comes to potential future security guarantees, the ones that would have some real skin in the game here, not only potentially with their own militaries, but also by the very fact that European security, it's felt by everyone here, really depends on the future security of Ukraine. But he knows still that Washington really does, at the end of the day, in so many ways, call the shots when it comes to the safety of Europeans, given that ongoing military reliance of the European side on the US, and therefore he's got a tightrope to walk, especially when that display of unity that they're trying to project here today is so caveated by all the cracks, and especially the ongoing US threats and talk of actually annexing part of a NATO ally, that is Greenland, which has been very pushed back on, rhetorically at least, by Denmark and some other European allies today. But what they could actually do about it, should push come to shove, that remains entirely unclear.
GW's Rosie Burchard with the latest for us from Paris. As always, Rosie, thank you.